Okay, good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch
Yes.
broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting nurture. All right.
As I said, it's good to be with
So
you this
far,
evening.
we've got the yellow dress on Razor Blade Girl, the rattlesnake scales first layer in,
Because when you have a
the
choice,
book scene
it seems to
roughed
me
in a little
reasonable
bit,
that you want to hang out
and the
with
spider,
people
all of
of
which
like
took
mind and
a
like
considerable
heart.
amount of time, even though they're pretty small, because the texture is pretty rugged
And
on
you
this
want to hang
surface.
out with
So
people,
what
I
I've
do
decided to
anyway.
do
I want to hang
next
out
is
with
to
people
take
who
these
want to
three,
grow, who want to
lay out
awaken,
the
who want
colors
to
for their
hear
clothing
how it
and
is,
environmental elements, the TV video
who
game
want
thing and the
to
slide,
find integrity in their
and
own
just
lives.
block in their clothing color, environment elements, and
Would like to be
move
statements
on
of
from there.
truth and beauty
So I've mixed up a
and
bright
presence.
cadmium yellow for this girl's dress and the slide colors, 2 tones of gray, a blue and kind of a
That's who I
khaki
like to hang out with.
for the suture guy, and then the video game kid is going to have a vermilion shirt and gray pants, and then shades
Now,
of
when I was a
gray for the
child,
television and the video
when
game
I'd say
console.
dirty words,
So
my mother would say,
I'll zoom in on those.
"You filthy mouth, little boy. Wait till your father gets home."
And
And
see how far we
my
can get
father
in
would
this
come
session.
home
Here we
tired,
go.
and my mother would say, "That dirty mouth little boy said thus and so." My father, taking his cue, would say, "Why, you little fool." And he'd get very angry, and now and then, when the word was foul enough, he would give me a clout on the behind. Well, now that makes me technically an abused child. So I could at this point join a group and that would be my identity. I am an ex-abused child, working to become unabused. Yeah. And I would hang out with other people who define themselves as abused children, ex-abused children, who are trying to work it out. But I remember Trungpa Rinpoche, a very far-out rascally Tibetan Lama. Once I was with him, and he said, "Ramdas," I said, I came in to ask him for meditation instruction. And he said, "Ramdas, at this point you should just be doing Ati Yoga. You should just be expanding outward with the mind." So he said, "Let's try it." And we sat across this little table from one another, and he had his sake glass. We looked into each other's eyes, and after about 20 seconds, he said to me, "Ramdas, are you trying?" I said, "Oh yes." He said, "No, don't try. Just expand outward." Because trying is a certain stance. I'm really trying to be healthy. I'm trying to do good. It's really not interesting enough. I mean, if you have a choice, why join the triers? Why don't you join the ditters? You want to let go of personal history, not celebrate it too much. And so if you're going to choose the group to be with, like about 11 or 12 years ago, I chose the Seva group to be with. Seva is a Sanskrit word which means to serve, and I figured if I want to be with a group of people, if I'm going to invest in hanging out with a group of people, at least let me find other people who share my desire to relieve suffering in the world. Seems reasonable. And I can tell you, 12 years in, it's the best game going in town for me. But it demands a lot. It's interesting to join a group like that. Because if you really share the desire to relieve suffering, you find out very quickly that it's easy to do good, but it's hard to do good well. And that in your zeal to get rid of suffering, you usually walk in heavily and end up creating more suffering than you eradicate, because of the violence of your zeal to do good. because you get stuck in righteousness, which is a really corrosive illness. It's milking the situation for a feeling of I'm good. I mean, either you are good or you aren't. So we had to eat our righteousness. Wavy Gravy, the clown, who's a member of the board, helped us a lot. Because he said, he introduced us to these glasses, which are called the serious glasses. And if anybody on the board uses the word serious, like dealing with death, violence, hunger, starvation, AIDS, they have to put on the serious glasses so we don't take ourselves too seriously. Because as Wavy pointed out, if you don't have a sense of humor, it just isn't funny. So we have to be very straight with each other, so that the suffering, so that in our zeal to do good, we don't create more suffering. Because there's a way of helping another person. Just make sure you leave space in the aisle so the fire marshal will be happy if he wants to walk down here, just in the center of the aisle. Because often when you do something for somebody, the act itself seems very good, but you're like Typhoid Mary. I mean, all she was doing was cooking. You know, no, what a kind thing to do. She was cooking for people. She was also spreading typhoid. And you can do good in ways that do funny things to other people. Because you can do good out of your own fear of getting too close to them. It's like pity. It's a way to keep people at a distance. And so you do good to them. And that in a way makes them feel separate. There are ways of doing something for another person that separates you from them. And then there are ways of doing something with another person that bring you together. And when you begin to realize that the healing of the human individual, the spirit, the healing of the being, is a process of heart-to-heart resuscitation, a quality in which you share heart with another person, you share heart space, a place of being together. And whether you give them food, or you can only hold their hand, or you can't do anything for the kind of pain or whatever they've got, you are here with them. I work with AIDS, people with AIDS. And there's a person with AIDS with extreme symptoms, with chaos lesions and with pneumocystis, pneumonia, and with numerous other opportunistic illnesses that have come because the immune system doesn't fight it off. And this person, let's say, is in his 30s. Very creative, talented human being who now realizes that probably his leaving his body is imminent. So his dream is crashing to the ground of who he thought he was. Now, what can I do for that person? I can commiserate with them. I mean, my heart can break because their heart is breaking. But also, if my mind is not too caught in the drama of somebody with AIDS dying, I can be an environment with my mind that will allow them to come out of the drama and just be another being with a different curriculum. Oh, the dying of AIDS. How interesting. Instead of, oh my God, I'm done with it. Everybody in this room, including me, has a drama that you are milking for all it's worth. I'm trying to get enlightened. That's a good one. I'm a meditator. I don't know whether I believe all this stuff or not. That's a good one. Everybody thinks they're somebody, and so they have a storyline. And the problem is we get trapped in our somebodyness. We get so well socialized into being somebody. We went into somebody training when we got born. Because our parents thought they were somebody. And they were certainly going to, somebody's train somebody's. They don't train nobody. So you become somebody. You really know who you are. You've got diplomas, and people say, she's really somebody. And then at some point you begin to realize you got trapped. It's called the moment of awakening. When you see you got trapped in your somebodyness. That no matter how luxurious your somebodyness is, it's like a large prison cell. And usually the first thing you feel is sort of pain and dis-ease. So you go to a therapist, and the therapist helps you rearrange the furniture in the cell. But just like Plato's cave, at some point you realize that you're in the prison of your own mind. And you have tasted the possibility of freedom. Now that first taste is when you break out of the structures of reality that your mind has created. And for most people, that when they acknowledge that experience, everybody's doing it all the time, by the way. But the culture, if it doesn't support it, they keep it to themselves. They even keep it from themselves. That's even further up. They say, I was crazy. God, I gotta watch my mind. I'm going out of my mind. Instead of, I went out of my mind. It's interesting, just in the past 20 years, if you look at the Gallup and Roper polls about how many people in this country believe in something after death, and how many widows believe they've been in contact with their husbands, the numbers have just been going up geometrically. Now, do you think it's really been changing, or people are just copying to it? I think 20 years ago you didn't admit that. You didn't admit you believed in reincarnation. What a flaky thing to believe. But it creeps up on you. Don't expect me to be linear, by the way, because see, the human mind doesn't work linearly, it works associatively. And for me to impose linearity on my mind does violence to it. And I really realize that what we're here for is to hang out, and I'll be what I am. And Gandhi said, my life is my message. So this is it. And so I just let my mind play with us. So you want to help another person, but it's very complicated, because if you are busy being a helper, you demand the other person be the helped. I used to be a psychotherapist, and I really thought I was a therapist. And if you think you're a therapist and you're in a room with another person, who could they be? And finally I realized that I could just be a being in another room with another being, and we do what we needed to do. If we needed for me to be a therapist, I'll play therapist. You begin to appreciate that you can extricate yourself from your definitions of who you think you are. It doesn't mean you can't do all those things, but you don't identify with them. And you can take them on and take them off and put them on.
It's 15 minutes. So should I say
The celebration's beginning.
all right, I think I'm going to take that here, Colin. Okay, in a minute.
So I sit with this being with AIDS, and I look until I see who's behind the being that thinks they have AIDS, and they think they're their body, and they think they're dying. Who's behind that? And the only way I'll see who's behind that in them is when I see who's behind that in me. So I have to get out of the way until I'm just here. And then I see another person just here. Are you in there? I'm in here. Far out. How did you get into that one? Yeah. And it's like you see another awareness, another entity inside a different drama. It's just like two actors meeting on the stage. And they're each costumed for their part. And as I see that other thing in that person, I feel so much love for that being who is going through this process of incarnation that my heart opens wide. Because I recognize none other than myself, really. Because if you go back far enough in consciousness, you find out, go by into relationships, and then you find out that you get back into awareness and there's only one of it. It's like the one God or one spirit, and then it comes in all these forms, and they're all like the one in drag. See, and the art is to see through the individual differences, to honor them, to honor our incarnation and our individual differences, but not to get lost in the drama of it. And so when you meet another being that you recognize, you in there, I'm in here, far out. How are you playing it this time? Well, I'm about to die of AIDS this time. Oh, didn't you do that last time? No, last time I... Well, have a good journey. Here I go. Dead. Again. See how weird it is? You know what this Hubble telescope is going to do? I mean, it's going to show us galaxies and galaxies and galaxies. It's like, what's his name? Billions and billions of years. And then you're going to realize how small it all is. You know those little bugs that are born in the morning and die in the evening? Around noon they say, this is life. Time is so funny, you know. We have all these different time units that we take as real. I mean, when you're a corporation stockholder, the quarterly report is your time unit. When you're an arbitrager, which changes currencies, you're a 2-second operator. You can be made a millionaire in about 2 seconds.
Alright, I'm pretty sure it's going to take longer than
like
8 minutes and 50
buying
seconds
Japanese
to
yen
do the
1
console
second
video game
before,
guy. So
everybody
I'm
else
going
figures that it
to
just dropped
take
over.
up a second part of this session. Here we go. Take 2 coming up.
Techniques use about
Take
1
2.
inch of topsoil every couple of years, and it takes 100 years to produce 1 inch. That's an interesting time relationship. Then there's the time relationship that to raise a person with support from the state takes child care and lunches and school programs and summer jobs for school students, college education. Wholesale, that's about $40,000. The government gets it wholesale. It would appear. $40,000 is just what it takes of 17 months of one person in prison. It's an interesting trade-off. But see, the predicament is that raising a person takes about 20 years. And our political time units are 2 to 6 years. People aren't going to go for programs that they're not going to see the results of. It's not going to get them elected. So that's funny, isn't it? And then how about the carcinogens that we're eating and drinking unknowingly? They have about a 25-year span before you'll know that that wasn't the right one to eat or drink. Okay? One interesting one, nuclear waste. Boy, did we blow it. You know, we really thought technology had beat the system. We're so arrogant. We thought atomic energy would do it. Cheap energy, it would really do it. Now we have so much waste material. I mean, we've got a stuffed intestine, the likes of which you wouldn't believe. And we can't get rid of this stuff. We don't know what to do with it, because the problem is, it is lethal for 250,000 years. That's 100 times the history of civilization. And we're sitting around saying, well, I have a theory. If you embed it in salt, it will be safe. Except the salt turns out to leak. And Admiral Watkins, the head of the atomic energy, he's told, look, just keep the game going, but go be truthful. He's truthful about everything except that he's committed to keeping the game going. And actually, the mistake is the game. And I know in my heart that's true. And yet I'm part of a social system in which that is not being acknowledged that that's true. Now that's an interesting problem for me. And the interesting question is how much you and I live with the dissonance between what our inner hearts know to be true and the external social institutions that we're affiliated with. That's fun. Something happened to me and a few others in the 60s that opened us to a feeling of compassion. The last 8 years with President Reagan, I did not feel that the image of my country was a compassionate one. And that feeling was painful to me because I was a citizen of this country, and this country's stated values were not in harmony with my inner heart of what I knew to be true. And so most of us, since we live with this all the time, we become sort of closet compassionates. You know, we sneak a compassionate act in, almost as a heretic act, an act of heresy. I mean, I work in Central America with Guatemalans, with Mayan Indians, beautiful Mayan Indians. Women whose husbands and sons have been murdered before their eyes by the army of a government that our government supports. And I'm there helping the Mayan Indians to survive. Now that's an act of heresy. It's going against my own country's policy. It's a funny kind of dissonance to feel. It seems to me what happened, I was just reading before I came out, a book about the Freemasons. You know the dollar bill has a, you know that pyramid with the break and the, I mean, you don't think of dollars much about what's on them, you just, they go by so fast. But that pyramid says, it's translated as, the works of humans are incomplete unless they incorporate divine insight. And the belief of the Freemasons was that leaders must be guided by supra-conscious intuition. That doesn't sound like the leaders I know. And yet, 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons, and 50 of the 55 people at the Constitutional Convention. So what we could argue now is not that these documents are not a method for integrating spirit into action, but that we are no longer able to read the maps because we're looking at it from a different place. We're looking at the individual as an economic unit, as a consumer or as an unemployed or employed person. If you like the 60s, you are going to love the 90s. Because the 60s were a time of change, incredible change. Civil rights movement, Kennedy, Peace Corps. It was a time of compassion, it was a time of idealism, it was a time of awakening. It was a time in which the individual human spirit stood up and said, what we are doing in Vietnam is wrong. Not that the Vietnam vets who were over there doing it were doing what they thought was wrong, but that the whole system behind it was wrong. And you can see that same feeling in the soldier, the student standing before the tank in Tiananmen Square, and you see it in Eastern Europe. You see the human spirit throw off the human mind's repressive forces in which ideas repress human spirit. And you hear the word democracy as if hearing it for the first time, as if freshly heard. President Havel of Czechoslovakia comes to our Congress and he blows the scene away with the purity of his heart and his truth. And we feel a strange feeling of disquiet, because these experiments in democracy are mirroring to us where we are, because we've been the champions of democracy. And our democracy was equated somehow with consumerism. It got lost. Our democracy at its height was the privilege of being Donald Trump, which is a bizarre obscenity. He isn't an obscenity. He's a mellow soul living through his trip, God bless him. I mean, somebody's got to do it, you know. They used to sacrifice maidens, you know. For a year they'd build her, you know, she'd be the beautiful queen, and then they'd chop her up. Poor Donald. It's like a sacrificial lamb that we need in this culture. Because this myth of individualism is an obsession with us. And we've got to allow that one person can amass billions and billions of dollars and power and buildings, and people are afraid of him. Except Ivana. On the Daily News, the headline was, "Ivana be rich." I want to be rich. That's great. See, we're living in a time of outmoded myths. The myths we have about who we all are aren't really interesting any longer. Not only aren't they interesting, but they are not good for our health. Not only aren't they, because they're starving us to death. First of all, they're wiping out our planet, because our myths were that you could take anything you wanted to make yourself. That was what freedom, that was what democracy meant. You could do anything you wanted to get what you wanted, to have it. And the whole issue of the common good got lost in something called the trickle-down effect. We talk about the 60s being exciting. Look at what you have at this moment. Politically, a whole sea of change in which everything's up for grabs all over again. Our whole political structure is based on having an enemy. If we don't have one, we got to create one.
Okay,
We don't have any
I
other
think that's
myths
it for
that
the
draw us
moment.
together other than having an enemy.
That gets those three roughed in.
Maybe
And we're just
we
going to
can
chip at
meddle
this a
in
little at a
cartel.
time. Start laying out details after we get all the color blocked in on all the scenes. But that sets them up
We've
adequately
developed
for the
a
moment.
whole web of no expectations of people telling the truth. I mean, it's so interesting that all of the North can stand up and
So
say,
thank you
yes,
for watching.
lied
That's
to
Adam Sturch
Congress,
broadcasting
did
from the
it for
Mushroom Mansion,
common
Taos, New
good.
Mexico, working on oil painting nurture. Have a good day, Earth.
Economically, we're in a far out position.